Welcome to our DevOps, DevSecOps standards day. I put both words in there because some people who aren't from the military domain may not recognize DevSecOps, but DevOps is a real thing. So what is DevOps? I'm going to ask a quick question. How many steps are there in a typical DevOps? Just throw out numbers. Eight. How many steps?
4 to 50.
4 to 50, 9, 6, there's lots of answers around the room that you could imagine. So if you kind of pull that to the next logical step, well, what are the steps in DevSecOps? Do I have to do them all? What tools should I use for which function? How do I actually get started? Which ones are absolutely key that I can't live without? Which vendors should I use and why? How do I change my mind? If I start in one direction, how do I go another direction? And then really for most of us who aren't in the DevOps game already, well, how do I get started? So we've got a common state of practice that all mature software development companies do is DevOps. Well, there's a little unrest in the DevOps world to say, what in the world is it? So how many in here have actually read the Phoenix Project? Wow, okay, so several. I highly recommend, if you don't get why is DevOps worthwhile doing, this was the book that really kind of opened my eyes as to see the potential of what doing DevOps could actually do for me as a software organization. It's a really, really compelling read. It's actually written in a narrative form, so it's kind of teaching you all the basic principles that you'll find in DevOps, but in a story-like format. So if you're, most of us in this room probably are geeks and nerds because we are at an OMG conference talking about technology standards. Maybe you really like reading specifications and things like that, but I'm maybe a little less geeky, and reading a book helped me a lot get my brain around what are we talking about and why are we doing this. So I went out online and I just did a quick Google definition search for DevOps. What's the definition of DevOps? And to reinforce my earlier concept, there are about 735,000 web posts on it, and they all were attributed to a different company, but there was no neutral forum that would say, well, here's the standard definition that you might really consider using for DevOps. But I went with the Air Force's definition because Air Force was a little bit ahead, or a good bit ahead, of other DoD agencies when it came to adopting these principles. So I took their definition, and just for boredom, I will read it for us all. It's a software engineering culture and practice that aims at unifying. All right, I'm not going to read it all. So you can read it. And it's actually pretty good, not bad. And literally in their definition, they say DevOps is not enough. So I said, okay, great. Well, why is DevOps not enough? Well, if you consider, it is really hard and really important to make sure you get software systems out there. But if they're not secure, especially for these kinds of domains, whether it's national security systems, military weapon systems, banking, healthcare, I could read all these to you. Power grid. Ooh, that scares me. Don't think about the power grid too much. You won't sleep well at night. But we need security weaved into the creation and deployment of software. But I found this really curious. The Air Force has a great definition for DevOps, but this is the extent of their definition for DevSecOps. So it doesn't go a whole lot further. So we're kind of in a target-rich environment here. They list a few metrics that are relevant for DevSecOps, but they don't really go a whole lot further to say, well, what does that actually mean? So what are we doing here today? We've been talking, actually, started a conversation in the C4I Defense and Military Domain Task Force, actually, right before COVID started. We really should start looking at, are there standards we need in the DevSecOps space? And then COVID hit, and that kind of shut down that conversation for a couple of years. We kept it kind of tagging along, but now that we're all back in the real world and people are talking to one another again, here we are today. Instead of releasing an RFI and getting a ton of white papers back that we don't know what to do with. We said, let's hold an information day. Let's get some customers and buyers in the room and talk about what do they need. Let's get some of our systems implementers, the poor folks who are out there trying to actually make this work and deliver capability. Let's get some of those big pipeline vendors in the room and talk about it from their perspective. And then finally, let's get some of the niche technology providers in the room and just see what do they want to do in this space. And really to start a conversation. This hopefully is not the end of the conversation. So thank you all for coming and jumping into the pool with us today. So why the OMG? As Steve talked about a little bit before, it's a public, open, transparent, neutral forum for the establishment of standards, which I think is very valuable. You get industry, you get academia, you get government people in here, you get consultants, you get experts, and you get newbies as well. So it's a great place for all to come together and collaborate. It's a coalition of the willing. Nobody's getting paid by OMG to be here except for staff. We're all paid by our member organizations to do our job, but we find value in coming here and making this together. So all the standards are initiated, pursued, and created by the voluntary participation of the members here. And like Steve talked before, this is a proven place to actually get things done, and it can happen as fast as you need it to or as slow as you need it to. And there are lots of relevant vertical domains already represented at the OMG that have a stake in this game. So here's today's agenda. Hopefully you saw this online, but if not, I'll just go through it real quickly. So we're going to start off. David's going to come up here in a minute and just kind of give us a view from his life, just trying to make this work from the front end as he's working for Boeing, a big systems integrator, trying to make DevSecOps work in the real world. And then Anil's going to come up and talk about bringing DevOps concepts to compliance. He's from the Cloud Security Alliance, and RegScale is your actual company, so appreciate you guys coming. And then you'll have to listen to me more in a little bit. I'll bring my perspective as a niche tool provider. Then we got Microsoft speaking right before lunch about your offerings. Thank you, Rob. And then after lunch, Mike and I will come up real briefly and give you a tour of some of the defense and military related standards. Also to just kind of give you a chance to get back from lunch and get your brain in the game again. And then Red Hat's going to come this afternoon and kind of do their version of what are they bringing to the table, how do they see standards helping. Then Bill Beckwith from OIS is coming, and then Jason Hunter from the United States Navy is going to kind of wrap it up with that customer perspective. Why do I need to buy things that use DevSecOps? And then we'll take a break, and then we'll bring all the speakers will be available, hopefully all of them, not necessarily all of them, some's got to travel and things, but chance to do a conversation, Q&A, and yes, the speakers provide perspective, but we have a lot of great perspective in the room as well. So hopefully that starts a conversation, and we can just figure out where to go from there. So let's start the conversation.